The public once believed that the marriage between Diana Spencer and Prince Charles was a modern fairy tale, where a common girl found her dream prince and the whole world watched a royal wedding that seemed torn from myth and legend. But behind the lights, beyond the glittering crowns and the smiles before the cameras, lay a much darker truth, a meticulously calculated arrangement orchestrated by the House of Windsor. According to archived documents from royal advisors and accounts from those who once worked within the palace, Charles never truly wanted to marry Diana. The woman he had once loved and wished to wed was Camilla Shand. However, due to Camilla's previous romantic involvement, and her being deemed not pure enough by the royal family's strict standards, she was removed from the list of potential queens by Queen Elizabeth and Lord Mountbatten, often referred to as the Iron Hand in the velvet glove of the monarchy. Diana, the daughter of the prestigious Spencer family, a noble lineage untouched by scandal, became the perfect choice on paper.
He was the most eligible bachelor in the world at that time, heir to the throne of England.
A young, gentle, obedient girl, exactly the image the public expected from the future wife of a king. But what few realized at the time was this: she wasn't loved. She was chosen, like a pawn tasked with cleansing, the tarnished image of a prince long criticized for refusing to settle down.
Was he? Sorry, was he completely off beam when he said we wouldn't have to wait too long?
No.
A long-time servant at Sandringham later recounted, she was taught how to fold bed sheets, how to walk gracefully enough to appear regal but not draw too much attention. But no one taught her how to survive among the wolves inside the palace.
To be engaged to such a lovely lady, and my goodness, I was lucky enough to marry her. And we had many messages.
The wedding night, which should have been the beginning of love, was instead the first time Diana faced the cold, the silence, and the lonely void inside one of the grandest rooms in Britain. And from that very night, the fairy tale began to unravel, revealing a far deeper crisis, a fracture from within a system once believed to be unshakable.
You got a plastic whale that throws things out the top, little balls.
In 1981, the world seemed to hold its breath for what was hailed as the fairy tale wedding of the century. But behind that nearly 8-meter-long wedding dress, behind the sweet smile of the Spencer girl, was a game of power that had been carefully orchestrated long before the ceremony ever began.
I think everybody noticed that she was Belson-like. I mean, she was pathetically thin.
When Prince Charles turned 30, the royal establishment began to grow concerned. A future king could not continue to drift through ambiguous relationships, especially as the British public had begun questioning his true role within the monarchy. A powerful gesture was needed to restore the royal image, and nothing served that purpose better than a marriage. Charles once wanted to marry Camilla, the woman he had loved since his youth, but that relationship was severed not by matters of the heart, but by the harsh standards of royal protocol. And then, Diana appeared. Just 19 years old, the daughter of Earl Spencer, born and raised on an ancient estate, innocent, shy, and most importantly, untouched by scandal. To the royal advisors, she was the cleanest card in the deck they were holding.
She was overwhelmed by it when she first came to it, when she first became engaged to Charles.
But what unfolded behind palace doors bore no resemblance to any fairy tale. Diana was never truly prepared for the role of a princess. There was no proper guidance, no emotional support, no one to walk her through the storm she was about to face. Even Charles, the man who was supposed to be her husband, her partner, never truly made her feel chosen. Records reveal that just days before the wedding, when asked if he was in love with Diana, Charles simply smiled and replied, "Whatever in love means." The wedding still went on. It was broadcast to over 70 countries around the world. But in Diana's eyes that day, somewhere between all the splendor and isolation, was the quiet intuition of a woman stepping into a life that was never truly her own. Diana's marriage to Charles was never a bond. It was a strange and lonely void where she constantly felt like the outsider. Though she entered the palace as his lawful wife, another woman, Camilla, had already been there long before and never truly left. Camilla Shand, Charles's long-time lover since the 1970s, had been rejected by the royal family but was never erased from his heart. Even after Camilla married Andrew Parker Bowles, her connection with Charles quietly endured. Late-night phone calls, encrypted messages, private nicknames like Fred and Gladys, all were signs of a relationship that had never ended. A former butler recalled that, while packing for a trip, Diana discovered a photo of Camilla among Charles's belongings. She said nothing, but the dazed, shattered look on her face that day said everything. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the quiet confirmation that her husband's heart had never belonged to her.
And not even bothering to hide it from her.
Even during their honeymoon, the cracks began to show. Charles brought along a pair of cufflinks engraved with the initials C and C, not for Charles and Diana, but for Charles and Camilla. Diana would later recount that she cried in the bathroom after seeing them, but no one noticed, and if they did, they chose to look away.
And the princess that evening was due to go out to the Serpentine Gallery to see her old friend Lord Palumbo.
Years later, when the infamous Camillagate tapes were leaked, where Charles told Camilla he wished he could live inside her underwear, all of Britain was stunned. But Diana didn't cry. She laughed, not out of amusement, but because the truth she had carried alone for so long had finally come to light, and because the pain had numbed her to the point where no more tears would come.
I think she's playing a clever game. I think she is aware absolutely.
Diana once said, "I married a man, but I had to share him with a triangle. That triangle didn't only include Charles and Camilla, it also included a system built to protect that affair. The royal family, the media, and even the very people who were supposed to support her."
I think every strong woman in history has had to walk down a similar path, and I think it's the strength that causes the confusion and the fear.
While Camilla could attend private functions under the title of the prince's close friend, Diana was scrutinized by the press for every minor gesture. A glance, a dress, a passing remark, all could make tabloid headlines laced with cruelty. But Camilla? She was shielded, hidden in plain sight. A royal secret everyone knew, but no one dared to speak of. Diana had no one to lean on. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just the ever-growing presence of a woman once denied the crown, yet who held on to something far more powerful, the heart of the most powerful man in the country. Diana once confided in a friend, "Every time I hear a door close, I don't know whether it's meant to keep me safe or to keep me under control." And in truth, the security detail surrounding her wasn't just for protection. Several of her bodyguards, especially those reassigned from Charles's personal team, were reportedly instructed to keep detailed daily logs of her activities, who she met, who she called, what time she left the house each morning. Every small action became part of an internal intelligence file. Behind the ancient stone walls of the monarchy, senior aides like Michael Peet and Mark Bolland, both close to Charles, maintained a covert media network. They worked quietly with friendly journalists to steer narratives, reintroduce Camilla to the public in a favorable light, and gradually erode Diana's image every time she showed signs of resistance. There was nowhere for Diana to hide. The press was often tipped off in advance whenever she appeared unofficially at charity events not approved by the palace. Her clothing, how she held her children in front of cameras, even what she ate, were all scrutinized with obsessive detail. But what terrified her most wasn't the headlines, it was the silence behind them. She knew she was being strategically isolated. Every time she spoke out, made a statement, or simply showed genuine emotion, she was labeled unstable, emotional, or mentally unwell. Meanwhile, Charles's missteps were framed as unfortunate misunderstandings, forgivable, even noble. A former royal media staffer later revealed the existence of a list of approved journalists, those who would receive carefully leaked information with a specific narrative. When Charles attended secret events with Camilla, the photos were edited before release. But if Diana was seen with any man, even a friend, she was immediately branded as seeking attention. For Diana, the palace no longer felt like home. It had become a battlefield where she faced the cold rigidity of tradition, the veiled hostility of the advisors, and the emotional neglect of her husband. And yet, in the darkest of those days, a flicker of resolve began to take shape within her. A simple but powerful realization. If she could not control how others treated her, she would learn to take control of her own story. Diana no longer wished to remain silent, and from the depths of that despair, she began preparing the most powerful counterattack the royal family had never seen coming. In 1991, a secret plan was quietly set in motion. Diana began collaborating with journalist Andrew Morton to write the book Diana, Her True Story. But there were no formal interviews, no monitored meetings. Everything was orchestrated through her trusted friend, Dr. James Colthurst. At each discreet meeting, Colthurst would bring a small tape recorder to capture Diana's tearful confessions, filled with pain, fury, and the desperate yearning to break free. These cassettes were then delivered to Morton, one by one. In those raw recordings, Diana spoke openly about harming herself to be noticed, about the loneliness that haunted her marriage, and the anguish of knowing Camilla had never truly left Charles's life. She did not sugarcoat, evade, or hide her sorrow. It was unfiltered truth, and for the first time, the world heard it in Diana's own voice, not through the distorted lens of the press. When the book was released in 1992, it sent shockwaves across Britain. The public, who had adored Diana for years, suddenly awakened from the illusion of a royal fairy tale. And the monarchy? It was caught completely off guard. Senior royal advisors were forced into emergency meetings. The image of a princess emotionally abused, betrayed, and manipulated. It could not be salvaged with a press statement. Then came Diana's next move, not with words, but with presence. After Charles publicly admitted to his affair with Camilla on national television, Diana attended a charity event in a form-fitting, off-the-shoulder black dress that stunned the world. The press dubbed it the revenge dress. But to Diana, it wasn't retaliation, it was a declaration. I am no longer a pawn in the royal game. From that moment, Diana began reshaping her public role. She gradually stepped back from ceremonial duties and focused instead on humanitarian work. Her visits to AIDS patients, her embrace of those cast out by society, these deeply human acts transcended her title. She became not just a princess, but a symbol of compassion and quiet strength. The palace could no longer control Diana's narrative, and that terrified them. But the brighter the light, the darker the shadows. Diana understood that power never surrenders quietly, and a woman who had torn apart the carefully constructed royal script was bound to face the consequences. A fateful summer was approaching. And this time, no speech, no dress, no camera flash would be enough to shield her from what was waiting outside the walls of royalty. Summer 1997. The Princess of Wales, no longer a formal member of the royal family, began a new chapter of self-reinvention on the global stage. Gone were the ceremonial duties, gone was the man who had once betrayed her. Diana was now free but profoundly alone. Princes William and Harry were vacationing with Charles at Balmoral. Her relationship with heart surgeon Hasnat Khan, the man she once described as the kindest and most grounded soul, had recently ended. In the early days of summer, she was seen aboard a luxurious yacht on the Mediterranean with Dodi Al-Fayed, son of the billionaire owner of Harrods. Paparazzi followed her every move. Tabloids splashed her swimsuit photos across front pages. Yet behind the smile and sun-kissed skin, many said she looked more sorrowful than ever. A close friend once recalled, "Diana told me if she ever died, it wouldn't be by accident. It would be orchestrated to silence her." Indeed, just months before her death, Diana had handwritten a chilling letter to her lawyer, Paul Burrell, expressing fear that a car accident would be staged, one that would cause head trauma, to eliminate her from Charles's life for good. Then came the 30th of August, Paris. Diana and Dodi arrived at the Ritz Hotel, owned by the Al-Fayed family. Outside, paparazzi swarmed like vultures. To escape the lenses, the couple planned a midnight departure through the rear exit. Driving that night was Henri Paul, the Ritz's deputy head of security. Reports claimed he had been drinking, yet toxicology results later showed inconsistencies that continue to raise suspicions to this day. The black Mercedes sped into the Paris night, reaching speeds of over 100 kilometers per hour, far above legal limits. And then, in the tunnel beneath the Alma Bridge, it struck a pillar. Dodi and Henry Paul were killed instantly. Diana was found alive but gravely injured. In her final moments, she was said to have whispered a few last words before succumbing to internal bleeding on the operating table at Pitti Salpetria Hospital. From London to Sydney, New York to Nairobi, the world stopped. Millions refused to believe the headlines, that such a brilliant light could be snuffed out by an accident. But what ignited global outrage wasn't just the crash, it was the cold silence that followed from Buckingham Palace. While hundreds of thousands gathered outside the gates, laying flowers and lighting candles, the Union Jack remained unmoved, not lowered to half-mast. The Queen stayed at Balmoral. No official statement. No expression of mourning. For 5 long days. Her funeral was broadcast as a national event. Though Diana was no longer royalty, over 2.5 billion people watched. Her brother, Earl Spencer, delivered a searing eulogy. Diana didn't need a royal title to work her magic. She needed only her heart, and the world loved her for it. Decades have passed, and still, questions remain unanswered. Why was there no royal protection assigned to her? Why was Henry Paul allowed behind the wheel in that condition? Who intervened and who stayed silent? Diana was not merely a betrayed wife. She became the central figure in one of the 20th century's greatest tragedies, where the palace was no longer a home, but a battlefield, where love was bartered for image, and where a woman brave enough to speak her truth paid with her life. She died in a cold tunnel beneath Paris, but the image of Diana, the people's princess, lives on, forever echoing as the voice that refused to be silenced in an empire built on silence. So why did an entire media empire like the British royal family choose silence when the heir to the throne openly committed adultery? And where was Queen Elizabeth II the ultimate symbol of power in the eye of the storm? First of all, Charles was no ordinary prince. He was the heir to the throne. Everything he did, said, or represented reflected directly on the image of the constitutional monarchy. His public admission of adultery was, in the eyes of the public, a scandal, but to the royal inner circle, it was a dangerous crack in the wall of power that had been carefully constructed through the sanctification of image. Any response from the palace, whether admission or denial, could risk bringing another layer of that wall crumbling down. Queen Elizabeth II, who had reigned for decades as a symbol of stability, did not choose silence out of indifference. She was often described as someone who placed duty above emotion, and the image of the monarchy above personal interest. In the Queen's eyes, every conflict, no matter how severe, must be handled quietly, never letting the public smell chaos from within the royal household. When Charles was exposed and Diana became a national icon, the Queen, according to many close sources, found herself in a dilemma: protect her son or protect the institution. The chosen solution was defend neither, but blame no one, at least publicly. In reality, Diana was gradually excluded from official activities, while Charles continued performing royal duties, still backed by veteran advisors like Sir Robin Janvrin and Michael Peet. Some observers believe the Queen fully understood that the public's emotional reaction to Diana posed a double threat. It could inspire overwhelming sympathy, but just as easily ignite fury if the palace mishandled the narrative. Thus, the strategic decision was to make no comment, to let time fade the scandal and allow the public to gradually forget amid the busyness of everyday life. However, a detail revealed years later raised questions. When Charles expressed his desire to remarry Camilla, it was Queen Elizabeth herself who for a long time refused to meet her. Many believe that while she remained silent outwardly, deep inside, Elizabeth II never fully accepted that her heir had shattered the sanctity of marriage so publicly. In the end, the royal silence was not a sign of approval, but a survival strategy. Because in the world of crowns and symbols, a single word can destroy generations. And in the tragedy of Diana, perhaps the most terrifying thing was not betrayal itself, but the silence of the most powerful, as justice was swallowed by the prestige of the throne.